Welcome to Book and Lounge. I'm your host, Jacqueline. In this episode, I sat down with Illiyin Morrison to discuss her book, The Birth Debrief. Illy is a midwife, a mother, a birth debrief facilitator who specializes in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum care and recovery. In this episode, she shares the importance of birth debriefing and useful tips on maternal wellness, advocating for yourself or your partner, how to empower your pregnancy, and coping with life postpartum and beyond. These are some of the topics covered in her new book, The Birth Debrief, which is due to be published this month. Let's meet Illiyin and hear what she had to say. Hi Illy, thank you so much for joining Book and Lounge. We're here to discuss your book, but before we get to the book, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Illy. I am a midwife, a mother of two, and a birth debrief facilitator. So I work in helping people overcome any trauma across the perinatal period. So from preconception all the way to sort of years into the postnatal period. So that's kind of, I'm based in Norfolk, in the east of England. I've been here for about 20 odd years. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
What's Norfolk like? I don't think I've ever been.
It's nice, it's a nice place. When we first moved here, we were probably one of the very few Black families. It's sort of like there's nothing beyond it. So when you're here. It's kind of like right in the corner. And so it was a very kind of, I suppose, white place for a long time. It's increasing in diversity as the years have passed. But yeah, it's a really nice place. It's a nice place to raise children. I love it. I've got no complaints. No complaints so far.
So are you actually on the coast?
Yeah.
You must have really great places to go walking and so on.
Exactly. There's lots of green. I suppose the closest beach is probably about half an hour from my house. So, it's really nice.
Oh, cool. It sounds lovely. So now just coming back to the book, I just wanted to know a little bit about your own experiences of childbirth and pregnancy and the whole process and how it informed your writing of this book.
Yeah. So basically, my first birth with my daughter, Ihsan, who is now 4, informed me getting into this work. So I was a clinical midwife working on a delivery suite in a very busy London hospital. And I had quite a difficult birth with her, which was supposed to be a home birth. It ended up with a cesarean section. But everyone kind of thought, yeah, this is great. It was a really good thing. Baby's fine, baby's healthy. But I didn't feel okay. In fact, I felt deeply kind of perturbed by the whole thing. When I then tried to go back into clinical working, I struggled to be there. I was working between Norwich and London, living in Norwich, working in London. And I was taking my daughter with me to London to work shifts. And it got a little bit too complicated anyway. In the end, I quit my job just before the pandemic. So the February before the pandemic. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. My husband he's Spanish, and ended up getting locked down in Spain for 4 months. So I was at home with like a 15-month-old baby. And luckily I was with my parents. And so I thought, well, why don't I just start this Instagram page? So started my Instagram page, and about 4 months in, decided to offer a reflection service, like a listening service. So in the last sort of 2.5 years, I think I have spoken to over 600 women about their experience, their perinatal experiences, and that has informed the book. It's a year next Wednesday. I had my son at home in a home birth, and it was a really sort of transformational experience. So all of that has informed my writing and where I am now, to kind of come full circle and present something which I hope will be a brilliant resource for the sort of birthing world.
Well, I've read it, and I'm not a mother myself, and so I wasn't really sure what to expect as I was reading it. But actually, I found it really interesting. It's helped me understand. I was completely oblivious to some of the things that birthing parents go through, and so it kind of helped me understand that. And then I found myself calling people to say, "How was your experience? What did you think?" So it's really helped me to understand parents. I just thought, like most people, that, once someone's had a baby, that's it. You've had the baby, everything's fine, you go back to life as normal. Reading this book has just completely opened my eyes. That there's a whole lot more to pregnancy and what parents go through when they have a child.
Yeah, and I think that's, that was the intention. I think initially I was like, yeah, this is a book for parents, but I didn't want to write a pregnancy book. I tend to sort of stay away from a lot of clinical advice because I think I'll leave that to those who are in clinical settings, as that is always changing. But as the book evolved, it's like, no, but this is for birth support. This is for families of those who have given birth, for people with no children who just want to feel informed and understand processes. And I'd like to believe that I have managed to tap into those people and supporting them to support others. So yeah, I'm glad that you said that.
You definitely have, because as I said, it's really has opened my eyes. The title is the Birth Debrief.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd never heard of a birth debrief.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, because I hadn't heard of it, I just thought, it's probably because I've never had a child. I've never gone through the pregnancy journey. And then I phoned up a few relatives and friends who've had children in the last 3-4 years, and none of them had heard of the debrief. So what is a debrief? And can you explain why it's important to new mothers to go through the process?
Yeah. So basically, a lot of hospital trusts here in the UK will offer what's known as a birth reflection service. Now, most of this is for those who have been left traumatized by their birth experiences, and they will get the opportunity to go through their medical notes with a senior member of staff, so an obstetrician or a senior midwife, to just get an understanding. And that's great. There are a few issues with those because obviously if that hospital is what has caused harm, is the place where the harm was caused, then perhaps they might feel slightly defensive when someone calls into question their practice. So we run that risk, but also because of what trauma is like, it can be very difficult for someone to trust those people to hold their story and also to go into that setting again. So there are a few sort of hurdles when it comes to going into hospitals for that experience. But also a lot of hospitals don't necessarily advertise it as a service. So lots of people will know about it if they've had what has been deemed a traumatic experience, or if they verbalize having had a traumatic experience. So what that means is, one, it leaves the kind of offering of that service to the person that is caring for them and their perception of trauma. So, I might think one thing's trauma and say, you need a listening service. And someone else might be like, nah, that wasn't traumatic enough, so she doesn't need it. So a lot of people perhaps need it, but aren't offered it. But the reason why I started to offer it privately was, one, because of impartiality. I have no loyalty to anyone but the person in front of me, which means that for them, it is a protected space. But also because when I had my daughter, it wasn't deemed traumatic at all. And yet I was left with feelings of trauma and I had nowhere to put them. So a lot of my clients are people who fall somewhere in the middle, where they're like, oh, it's not deemed traumatic enough, but I'm left with all of these feelings. And so we really unpack those. And so for those people who are either traumatized or who are just left with questions or are not understanding their feelings around their experience, that is what that birth debrief is for. And for those who have deeper trauma, who feel like they can't go back to the hospital, or they're not interested in going back to the hospital, I can also help to support them as well. So, it's an important thing to do. We know that talking about our experiences can really change our perception of them and reframing them and reflecting on them. So that is why I've offered the service, but also why I've written the book, so that people can take their own time with their processes rather than kind of being on a paid time.
And so what happens in a typical debrief session?
So basically what tends to happen is I will ask a series of questions about sort of what their experience was like, what stood out to them. And in that, we'll then just break down what their feelings are around it and explore why they might happen from both a clinical perspective, but also an emotional and mental one, and perhaps the consequence of those experiences. So where parents are perhaps left wondering why they didn't feel an immediate feeling of love towards their child, and they're facing feelings of guilt around it, we unpack that and say, well, actually, it's really quite normal. So a lot of it is breaking down stereotypes and expectations and really helping to explore those feelings that I think many new mothers and new parents face.
And so you've mentioned trauma as a common experience. What would qualify as trauma to the professionals, and also what actually me as an individual would, because I think there's a difference between what the professionals would classify as trauma. What I may think is trauma, they may not think as trauma. So can you just give us a bit of examples?
Yeah. So, birth trauma affects approximately 33% of women in the UK and approximately 10% of men. These are estimates because we know that a lot of it is unspoken and people don't report these experiences. So I would say it's a gross underestimation. Now, the issue is, so as a clinician, I can say perhaps a postpartum hemorrhage of 2 litres, which is a major obstetric hemorrhage, is the trauma. But that person might be like, well, I'm okay, like I feel fine, so don't worry about me. And whereas someone else might lose 500 mils of blood, but feel so traumatized by it that is a trauma that is happening to them. Now, the thing about trauma isn't what happened. Trauma is your response, an internal response that happens within you to an external situation, which means that it's going to be based on perception. So, in fact, we can't give a definition of trauma because that only sits within the person who is experiencing it. So, as I'm hoping we're moving through times where we stop telling people what their trauma is and we allow them to tell us how they're feeling about their experiences, because it opens up conversation and it really allows people to express their own truth rather than it being dictated to them.
One thing that really surprised me is the statistics about the number of men that experience trauma, because I don't know, I just never thought that they, as supporting parents, would also experience trauma. So I found that statistic really surprising. In fact, that then prompted me to phone a friend to ask him what his experiences of pregnancy was, and whether or not he would have a debrief. And he basically said that he feels like he suffered PTSD.
Yeah.
However, he did not want to talk about it because he felt that would just bring up everything again. So he just preferred to bury it and not talk about it ever.
See, it's interesting because this is the thing, when we look at someone who's supporting someone who's given birth, they are viewing things from a different lens. So the person who is living it might be like, I don't remember anything that happened. I was out of it. But the other person is watching, and we know that PTSD is caused by either thinking you or someone you love is going to die. So that sense and that feeling of being out of control, coupled with the machismo, that kind of masculinity that comes with, I need to be steady, I need to be firm, I can't cry, I can't show weakness, I can't be traumatized, means that we end up with a lot of men, which is why I say it's a gross underestimation, feeling like they can't communicate that. Because if they then do that, it's like a sign of weakness. And they think that they bury it, but they don't actually bury it. The body keeps hold of what happens. And so in actual fact, it manifests in different ways. You can often see it, it will manifest perhaps in how they manage stressful situations, or how they feel towards their partner or towards their child, or in anger, irritation, frustration, in illness, stress, anxiety. So, they think they've buried it, but it's not really buried. It's just manifesting or kind of being expressed in a different way.
But what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling with childbirth related trauma?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, my first thing to them would be, get your thoughts out of your head. And that could be with a professional, but it could also be with a friend or a loved one, or it could be just on paper and journaling them, or, on your phone in notes or whatever. But get things out of your head. When things are in our heads, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so getting them out means that we can kind of see them and then order them and make plans for what we're going to do, or hear other people holding that for us so that it's no longer all on our shoulders or in our brains. So that would be my first thing. And once that's done, to then explore what the options are around overcoming that. So, whether if you're in the UK, whether the NHS offers something free, whether there are people like myself who offer it at a cost privately, or whether you could do with more extensive support. So, regular therapy, birth trauma therapy, or things like cognitive behavioral therapy or EMDR, which I also reference in the book as options for helping overcome trauma.
Right. So for people who don't know, what does EMDR stand for?
So EMDR is a practice which works with eye movement. And so it basically goes back to those traumatic memories and helps you to essentially reframe them or rework them in your brain. It's quite an effective tool, but it's done over a series of sessions, and you kind of work through it with a professional. So it's a very good technique, and has been shown to be very successful with those who are suffering from birth trauma. So if you are someone who is needing something like that, then just have a look for it, and there will be professionals that can support you with that.
You mentioned journaling, and that's something that you encourage in the book. But the other thing that I really liked about the book is that after every section, you give the reader the option to reflect, reframe, and redefine. And then you also have affirmations, and then the type of questions that they can ask. And why do you think that is very important for someone who may be experiencing some of these issues?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the time, because we are so, the world is fast moving, and we often don't have time to sit and reflect. And so by not doing that, we can't actually see things for what they were. We can't learn from them or see how we can redefine or reframe them. And so the first one is always to reflect, like, okay, so if you think back on your experience, what was that like? And now how can we reframe it, or how can we redefine it? And so for me, it was like, that needs to be a consistent practice along the book as we talk about those issues, such as your relationship postnatally, your bond with your child, your feeding experiences, your traumatic experiences. I want you to just take a second and just reflect on that and see if through the advice and support I've given in the book, you can then reframe and redefine those experiences. So for me, as a Muslim, reflection is something we do 5 times a day. We sit, we stop, we think, and it's that stillness that I think is actually should be a normal practice. And when some people, they might do it on Sundays at church, or every day if they want to. They might do it through yoga, through meditation, through mindfulness. Everyone has their way in which they'll incorporate that, but I'm hoping that through the book it just becomes regular practice for people in whatever form they do it, because actually it's how we inform changes and how we work through our experiences.
And you also emphasize the importance of empowering you in pregnancy.
Yes.
So how can pregnant women and their partners create positive, empowering birth experience?
So basically, the tools in the book will help you to empower yourself. I think the narrative around empowerment is that it's something else we've handed over to someone else. Someone else will empower me. And it's like, no. I'm not empowering you. You're empowering yourself. You have this power. So it's giving that back to you. And the ways in which I give it back to you in the book is by giving you tangible ways in which you can do this, such as get the right support, ask the right questions, write things down, surround yourselves with a team that will do what they need to do in order to ensure that you have the experience that you are worthy of. And so it's about you tapping into your own power to then go forth and have the experience that you should have.
I really like the section where you were talking about the superpowers that you should have. As I was reading them, I was thinking, actually, this applies to anybody who's going through some kind of interaction with the medical profession.
Yeah.
And I really found them helpful. And I just think to myself, I wish I'd, read this before I had my own experience with doctors.
Yeah. And I think, particularly for Black women, it's so important that we have that, because as I speak about in the book, we are at increased risk when having children. And, I again think we need to be practicing this regularly, but we don't only need to practice it in pregnancy and in birth, but we need to practice it for our children, our babies who are voiceless and who are also at increased risks of stillbirth and medical complications. We need to know how to use our voices. We need to know how to advocate for them. And so, that's what I want. I want people who, even if they say, I'm not having any more children, to still take the book and be like, but this I can apply to the rest of my life. I can take it and apply it to the context of my situation, which is why I think, the book is such a powerful tool, because it's like this can follow you through. And I said to my editor right at the beginning, I said, I want this book to stand the test of time, which is why it couldn't be necessarily all focused on current events. I want someone to pick this up in 20 years and be like, I can still apply this to my life now. And I think we've achieved it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I said I'm not a parent, and I've read it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to apply that. I'm going to be that.
Amazing.
Coming back to Black and brown women's experiences. So, Black women, in your book, you write that they are 4 times more likely to die from childbirth and pregnancy. And then Asian and are likely to 2 times more likely to die. I mean, we do know that the treatment that we get is not the same treatment as, for example, a white woman would get. And my question then is, as a Black woman, I'm going to meet all these professionals. They already have preconceived ideas about me, how I experience pain, how I speak. What is it that I need to do to make sure that I'm heard? But at the same time, I'm not seen as the angry Black woman, the aggressive Black woman.
So, because a lot of these issues and these biases, essentially it's a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue that has filtered down, and then individuals express it through their unconscious biases or their very conscious biases. So this means that we as one race or two races, or mixed women are also at an increased risk by about threefold. So we need to recognize that we are not able to overturn the system. That's not what we can do. So we need to alleviate ourselves of the pressure of doing that and take it down a notch to be like, right, I'm going to zero down on myself and how I conduct myself in this setting. Sometimes we have to play the game. We pick our battles. We play smart, aware of our risks. And then we mitigate those by doing all the things like getting the right people, saying the right things. This is important, because you might be like, yeah, but I should just be taken at face value. But it's like, the issue is systemic and that might not happen. And so you have to then be like, I understand I'm at an increased risk here. So what do I need to do to ensure that I'm heard? Well, it might mean that I need to not speak in a normal tone. It might mean that I shouldn't get angry, because despite the fact that I know that it is a gross stereotype, it is not going to serve me in this setting. So I'm going to reserve my anger and then go talk to my friends about it, or talk to my people about it who understand what I mean. So sometimes we have to play the game. Now, outside of that, it's actually, okay, I need to position myself in the best way possible. Where is a place that is safe for me? Who are the people that are safe for me and safest? Sometimes it's not going to be the most safe, but they're the safest that you could get. So in my case, for example, it was opting for a home birth, because for me, that was the safest place to be. And so those are the decisions that we have to be thinking about. Like, okay, if I know that hospital is renowned for being racist, is that a safe place for me to put myself? Probably not, because you can't change the racism. You as one individual aren't going to be able to change racism. So then you think, right, should I go there? Do I have the option of going somewhere else? Do I have the option of seeking out different support? So we have to start to really think, these are the risks that I'm facing. I can't change all of those, but I can protect myself as best as I can. So I speak a lot about advocacy in the book, allowing other people to use their voices to support you. Escalation, where you say, actually, no, this is not okay. I need to speak to someone more senior. Getting everything documented and documented again, so that it's very clear what's going on. Understanding your rights, which is vital. And really kind of knowing the system that you are going to birth in, and then making the choices that are appropriate.
And the other thing I actually thought that the book would be really good for is people who are not necessarily aware of these things, and also just of how the whole medical system works and how the whole system is set up. This idea that you get someone to advocate for you, I found that really, really powerful, because there are people who are there because of the cultures within which they've been brought up. They're not necessarily encouraged to speak and to speak for themselves. And your advice, to get someone to advocate for you, I think that's really, really important.
As my late mum was Afro-Caribbean, she's from Jamaica, and the cultures around what we say, and her parents and their parents were like, we're lucky. And that's really filtered down this idea of luck. And it means for a lot of us, we accept crumbs because we feel fortunate. And it's like, but actually, no, because what I'm asking for is a basic human right, and it's a human necessity, and I do not deserve less than anyone else because of the color of my skin or the culture of my people or anything like that. So actually, if you won't give me my space at the table with my plate, then I will make sure that I am supported by someone who will push me in that space and ensure that I get it.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
What you just said actually just reminded me of something that I heard not too long ago, where when older generation Black medical professions are treating us, their attitude has been that, well, we went through it.
Mm-hmm.
We gave birth without, any pain relief. Just suck it up and, get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered, does that still happen now?
Yes. But even this and this is something, and I state this in the book, like by highlighting the experiences of Black women and other ethnic minorities, we are not taking the attention away from those who have experienced that, because there'll be everyone from all walks of life who will experience things like that, from older generations particularly. Mm-hmm. However, by highlighting this, we're saying, but we should all receive better care. I'm highlighting this thing that we experience, because if we get better care, you get better care. We're all getting the same care. That's all we want. We all want better care. Mm. So that type of attitude around that generational attitude of, we've done it before, is like, actually, we need to be the voices to say that. So what? So what? Should we suffer? Do we continue the suffering, or do we make changes? Mm-hmm. And at some point, things have to change. So actually, I'm going to fly that flag. I'm going to be like, I'm not willing to accept this. I'm not willing to go through this. I'm not willing to normalize it anymore. And you might get pushback from older generations or family members who are like, oh, don't be ridiculous. But don't worry about that. It doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. You set the bar for yourself and you go forth and you expect everyone else to reach it. You don't lower it.
Yeah. And in the book, you include experiences of lots of people that you've worked with, people who've come to you for a debrief. So can you just discuss the process of gathering and incorporating that information and those stories into the book?
Yeah. So basically, I just asked them. I said, would you be happy? I'm writing a book. Would you be happy for me to share your experience, from things like perineal trauma to difficulty bonding with their children, difficulty with feeding choices, and they're very happy to, because again, like we've just said, when you're trying to break down stigmas and stop normalizing certain things, it's like, actually, no, share my story, because I need people to understand this is what we're going through in order to create change. And so people were very happy for their stories to be included, because it will inform change for many.
And maternal wellness is a central theme in the book. So you encourage meditation, you encourage good nutrition, you encourage exercise if you can.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about the different factors that contribute to maternal well-being?
Yeah, I think if we look at poor maternal well-being, it's a lack of prioritization on a societal scale. We live in a patriarchal-led society, and this has meant that mothers are often right at the bottom when it comes to their well-being. So it's how we're looking after ourselves on a systemic level. What is there as a provision for us, but then also how we respond to the challenges that we face as mothers. What are we doing about it? How are we going to overcome them on an individual or a communal level? I speak about creating your community, finding your support, because ultimately by doing that, you will ensure your own well-being. You kind of push yourself and you say, you know what, it might be uncomfortable. And for many, it is uncomfortable to go and try and make new friends, particularly in adulthood. And when we are recently postnatal and probably feeling quite insecure and not perhaps feeling that comfortable in this new identity, but it is more important to create that community and to have those people around you to ensure your ultimate wellness and the wellness of your child or children. So, it has to take precedent over that kind of initial discomfort or that ego that's like, no, I don't want to seem needy, or, because actually that's the only way that we will have better and be better for our children.
Yeah, and the community doesn't necessarily just have to be your family. It can just be people other mothers.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's the you unite through a mutual experience of mothering, and then if you have other things in common, then great.
Mm-hmm. And you run something like that where you do, correct?
Yes, I do. I run women's circles, so fortnightly women's circles where all the mothers and parents of Norwich are invited to just come and have coffee and meet each other, babies of whatever age, it doesn't matter, pregnant women, because I think actually if we can do that for people, we'll all actually be much happier.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, would you say has been like the most shocking thing that someone has told you about their experience? Or
Oh,
even funniest?
from the groups. I mean, from the groups, it's very, do you know what? A lot of the time, I'm like, I step back from the groups because of my social media presence. I don't want it to be about me. I'm sort of just like, I sit in the corner, you all just meet up. And actually, it's become so much better because they're not there to talk to me. Because otherwise, it would end up with me debriefing people in a social setting. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. And so in the groups, it's been really quite, I don't know, like organic conversation just about other things outside of difficulty. In my work, there's all sorts, from sort of things that have been said by doctors and healthcare professionals to partners being absolutely useless because they don't know what to do. I think it's generally just the maternal world is full of tales, I tell you.
Right. So you haven't heard anybody saying, I left the baby in the park.
Well, do you know what I've heard quite a few times is people perhaps leaving the baby somewhere in the house and just forgetting them. So not leaving the house, but being like, oh my gosh, the baby. I had someone say to me the other day that they woke up in such a daze and their baby had kind of fallen down the side of the bed where there was a big space, there's a big enough gap. The baby was just down the end of the bed snoozing. But they just couldn't find them. They searched the whole house high and low, and this baby was fast asleep at the end of the bed. And I thought, you're just lucky that was a big wide space at the end of your bed, because they couldn't. They were freaking out. They're like, who's come and taken my baby? And the baby had just wriggled its way down to the end of the bed and was like, it's more comfortable down here. So those things happen. I think sleep deprivation will definitely have us forgetting.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Because my sister had a baby last May.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does forget a few things. And my other sister's always saying, oh, you just go easy on her. She's got baby brain.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
And moving on to postnatal recovery. So once you've had the baby, you've gone to hospital, you're out of the hospital, you're basically left to your own devices. What are some of the strategies that you can offer mothers who've just, had the baby and then they're sent home? That's it.
Yeah. So one of the biggest ones is to really tune into your own self and say, are you feeling okay? Does this feel right? Does it not? Is it comfortable? Is it alarming? And to escalate accordingly. Another thing is to definitely rest, and rest according to what you think rest is. So not necessarily for some people. When I had my daughter and people would say, rest, rest, rest. And I was like, no, this is not comfortable for me. I need to be up and about. And then when I had my son, it was the opposite. I was like, I am not leaving this bed, because my idea of rest and my need for rest had changed. But rest, I think, is essential, particularly in an early newborn phase. So if you can have people around you that cook for you, that tidy up, that help you with yourself predominantly. So, a lot of the domestic tasks, if they can take those on to allow you to really kind of transition into that role as a mother, it's really important. And to not put any pressure on yourself to feel anything other than you feel, and to be aware of if those feelings change, and to have someone with you who can see things that perhaps you can't. So if you're feeling down, or if perhaps those feelings of feeling low are lasting a little bit too long, they're aware of them. Really having a good support network, resting, eating well, and looking after yourself both emotionally and physically.
So that's basically the birthing parent, the mother. How about the guys? Because I spoke to my partner who's got 2 kids, and he was saying that when he had his children, when the health visitors came, he was completely ignored. All the advice was given to the mother, although he was helping with all these things, but he felt very neglected. And what advice would you give to the men or the other person who's supporting the mother?
Yeah, my biggest thing is to make their presence known. So without taking away from someone else, it's to say, actually, I want to be part of this too. And despite the fact that they might feel like they're not welcome to be part of it, it's important that they assert themselves and say, actually, no, ask the questions, show your interest. And that's for the partner as well, to see that actually they do want to be involved. So, but also, this isn't about making other people see them as something else. It's about them knowing who they are, them knowing what their purpose is, them knowing what their role is. And so don't let a health visitor who's ignoring you determine how you show up. It's like, actually, that's on them. I already know what I need to know. I already know what I'm doing, and no one's going to dictate to me if I am the parent that they think I should be or not, or, you know, if they're ignoring me or anything. If they know that actually they are an active participant in this parenting experience, they do know how to do things, just keep doing them. Just keep doing them. You know, don't seek affirmation from anyone else. You know your role, and get on with it, because the people that matter are aware of what you're doing. And that's what they need to remember.
And in the book, you talk about this idea of the perfect mum. Right. And can you just tell us why the perfect mum is a myth and is something that we should absolutely forget and dismiss?
Because perfection, similarly to trauma, is based on perception. So for you, what might look perfect is one thing, and for someone else, what might be perfect is another. This idea of this perfect woman, she's an enigma, because who is she? By whose standards is she perfect? So it's like that person prevents us from reaching our own standard of perfection. So it's like, actually, what's perfection to me? Is it being able to tune into my child? Is it being able to look after myself? Is it being able to cook, but perhaps I need a cleaner to help me with cleaning? Is it saying, actually, I'm not going to go to all the baby groups, but I am going to make sure that my house is tidy? What does that feel like to you? Set your own standards. And so this perfect mother, she doesn't allow people to tune into that for themselves. So we have to forget her, because she doesn't exist. And so if you're aiming to try and be like her, you'll never get there, because she's not real. So if you then stop and go, well, how am I? What do I think is perfect? What is achievable for me? What goals can I set if I want to? Then you'll be much more likely to reach that idea of what is like a personal perfection than this unicorn perfection.
And I think comparing yourself to other mothers and this idea of the perfect mother, it is one of the things that could possibly lead to mental illnesses.
Definitely.
And what resources do you recommend to mothers incorporating into their lives if they find themselves spiraling into a depression?
Yeah. So I always recommend that they understand what their local offerings are. So any services that are available to them through their hospital trusts or insurance policies or wherever they are in the world. But otherwise, again, speaking to someone if they find that their mood is too low. So going to your GP or something like that. On a scale which is something that everyone can do and accessible for everyone, is looking at what is causing that. Is it this idea of perfection? Is it setting unachievable tasks? Is it comparison? And really kind of looking at that and going, actually, this isn't serving me. Being honest with yourself and saying, right, who am I? What can I do? Will be the start to kind of living a much more fulfilled experience of motherhood, because you're basing it on what you can actually do rather than what someone else is doing or what you think they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And so to round up, what would you say the message or the key takeaway is for readers from the book? And how do you hope it will impact their experiences of pregnancy and childbirth?
Yeah, the key message from the book is that you are at the center of your experience, and to always hold your space there. And so there will be things that will rock that boat, and we speak about them, the things that create those wobbles and what feel like tumbling down. And it's like, this book will teach you how to pick yourself up, stay at the center, and constantly redefine that experience that you're having. And this is something that is constantly changing and in motion, and within all that you stay centered and focused. And so it's kind of how you can do that. It will give you the tools to do that, and it allows you the freedom to wobble and ask those questions and to worry and to feel scared and insecure and traumatized, and to bring yourself back to the middle and to continue on. So that's the key messaging through the book, and I really hope that is what it can give people.
The book is going to be published this month, and so where can people who are interested in getting hold of a copy buy one?
Yeah, so you can buy it on all of your usual sites. So, your Amazon, Waterstones, Smiths, Blackwell's. Indie sellers, you should be able to find it at a few of those. Go to your local bookshops. You might be able to find it in some of the smaller bookshops. And you can also get it on Audible. If you like to listen to an audiobook, which I recorded a couple of weeks ago. So that will be me reading that so that you can kind of hear it instead. For many of us who I know will be the audience of the book, we're so busy, we don't necessarily get the time to sit and read. So, an audiobook is an option. But yes, you should be able to find it in lots of places. If you are in Canada, someone told me the other day, you can order it from Amazon in the UK and they'll ship it to Canada. It is not currently available in the US, but hopefully that's something we are working towards.
And you mentioned earlier on that you are on Instagram. If readers or listeners want to get hold of you, how can they find you?
Yes, you will find me at Mixing Up Motherhood, and there's a link to my website there where you can get a bit more information about the services and products that I offer. Or you can just follow along and watch me talk about lots of different things, including my food choices, my children, my challenges, my trials and tribulations. And yes, if you need any support from me, that is where you'll find me.
And I'd just like to add, it's actually a really interesting page on Instagram. I visited it when I was initially sent the book, and I saw your video about the snacks from Spain.
I take my snacks very seriously.
I could tell. I would definitely recommend, even if it's just for entertainment purposes.
Thank you.
Worth visiting. So I just really, at this stage, want to say thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I read the book and I absolutely love it, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody, not just those who are going through the pregnancy journey or those who have been through the pregnancy journey. I would actually just recommend it to everybody because there's so much useful information in there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for writing it for us.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of the other episodes, please like, share, or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, goodbye.